What's going on? You didn't make lunch today. My husband suddenly yelled at me over the phone. He sounded upset that I hadn't prepared his lunch and that I wasn't home. I reminded him I had told him to manage by himself while I was out, but he retorted, "Aren't you a housewife? That's your job, right?" He even mentioned how I had been a housewife instead of pursuing my studies. It was frustrating. How could he make such a big deal about missing lunch for one day? I was tired of doing all the housework and then being scolded when things didn't go perfectly for him. As he yelled over the phone, my mother-in-law stood nearby, listening. She had a faint smile on her face. "My name is Emily. I live with my husband, Nicholas, and our two adorable twin boys, Seth and Rey, who are 2 years old. They are the light of my life and the biggest source of my happiness right now." Nicholas works as a businessman for a large company. His family owns a traditional Japanese confectionery store located in a small shopping arcade. After we got married, I quit my job and started helping out at the store. At first, I enjoyed it. It felt like a fresh, exciting experience. However, working at the store turned out to be busier than I expected. Besides serving customers and showcasing beautiful traditional sweets, wagashi, I also had to prepare sweets in the kitchen early in the morning, especially during busy seasons. Even after the twins were born, I kept working at the store. Sometimes, I'd work with one of the boys strapped to my back. Their cries would echo through the store, even when I was trying to keep them out of earshot. Balancing childcare and work was exhausting. Unlike me, Nicholas wasn't interested in the family business. "Do you have any plans to take over the store?" I asked him one day. "We've talked about this before," he said, annoyed. "I've told you, I'm not taking it over. Wagashia isn't popular anymore. The shopping arcade gets fewer visitors every year. If I take over now, I won't have a future." Nicholas had no intention of running the confectionery shop. He was too focused on his career in a larger corporation, leaving the family business and its struggles entirely up to us. My thoughts on the family store. I love my in-laws' confectionery shop and don't want to see it disappear. "Are you going to pachinko again today, Nicholas?" I asked. "Of course I am," he replied. "What I do on my day off is my business." On holidays, my husband spends his time playing pachinko. He even lines up early to get in when it opens. While he enjoys his day off, he completely ignores housework. I'm the one handling everything: cooking, cleaning, laundry, and all the other housework. On top of that, I take care of our twin boys and help run the family confectionery shop. Nicholas, on the other hand, takes life at his own pace, leaving me overwhelmed with the growing workload. My in-laws are getting older, which means there's even more to do at the store. Despite this, my mother-in-law has always been incredibly kind and understanding. "Emily, we're so grateful for all the help you give us at the shop," she would say, her voice warm with gratitude. She's a lovely woman and treats me with genuine kindness. Her gentle smile always lifts my spirits. But it's clear that she wishes Nicholas would step up and take an interest in the family business. Whenever we talk about him, she looks sad. "I really need Nicholas's assistance," she once said. Unfortunately, he shows no signs of wanting to take over the confectionery shop, which deeply disappoints her. Support from my mother-in-law. Even though my husband refuses to help or take responsibility, my mother-in-law is incredibly supportive. "Well, we're lucky to have such a wonderful wife like Emily," she said. "We shouldn't be greedy." She always praises me and appreciates how I manage the store while raising my children. When I'm working, she and my father-in-law babysit the kids, which is a huge help. Over time, my bond with my mother-in-law has grown stronger. She's become someone I can talk to about anything, even my frustrations with my husband. Ironically, the more distant I feel from him, the closer I feel to her. Having my in-laws around is a great comfort during these busy times. Raising my two boys is so busy that the days blur together. There's hardly any time to think about much else. Now, as the end of the year approaches, the confectionery shop is getting even busier. This is the peak season for gift giving, and we're transitioning to meet the increased demand. After discussing with my in-laws, we decided that I'd stay home this year to focus on preparing wagashi. When I told Nicholas about staying at my parents' place for one night to help during the busy season, he was clearly upset. "What, you're taking the kids and staying at your parents' house?" he asked, annoyed. I explained it was just for one night and assured him there wasn't much to worry about. But as expected, he started complaining. "What about the housework?" he asked. "Nicholas doesn't do any housework, so even one day without me managing everything is a big problem for him." I tried to reassure him. It's only one night. Everything will be fine. If you get hungry, you can prepare something for yourself. There's no need to do laundry for just one day. You'll survive. Still, he grumbled, you're a housewife, aren't you? Isn't this your responsibility? I'll say it again, I'm the breadwinner of this family. I told my husband, who do you think is in charge of feeding our 2 kids? He grumbled in response, and I didn't want to argue anymore. So, I said nothing else and took the kids to my in-laws' house without asking my husband for permission. When I arrived at my parents' house, there was a lot of work waiting for me. It was the end of the year, and business at the confectionery shop was picking up quickly. Orders for year-end gifts were pouring in, and I knew I had made the right decision to help out. The first task was assembling empty boxes for the gifts. It was harder than it sounded, especially since hundreds of boxes had to be prepared for the season. My in-laws and I worked together to get it done. By the end of the first day, I was exhausted, but the next morning, I had to get up early to prepare wagashi sweets for the day ahead. I decided to go to bed early so I could start working right when the sun rose. While the kids were still asleep, my in-laws and I worked quietly in the kitchen. Before I knew it, the sun was up, and we decided to take a break for breakfast. The kids were already awake and ready for breakfast, so I quickly made it and served them. As we sat down together, my phone rang. It was my husband. What's going on? You didn't make lunch today? He yelled at me as soon as I picked up. He was upset because there was no lunch prepared, and he seemed to think it was my job to do it even though I was away. I told him to make his own lunch while I was gone, but he didn't like that response. He accused me of avoiding housework, even though he never helps out. It was ridiculous to make such a big deal about not having lunch for just one day. I was shocked by his reaction, and it seemed my in-laws were too because they could hear him yelling through the phone. Finally, he rambled on about whatever he wanted to say before abruptly hanging up the phone. Even though breakfast was just served, the living room at my in-laws' house was unusually quiet for a while. My husband had lost his temper in an unreasonable way, which wasn't surprising. The kids seemed to sense the tension and didn't want to eat. Trying to lighten the mood, my mother-in-law cheerfully said, "Itadakamasu," a phrase said before meals in Japan, and encouraged my sons to eat. Then, she turned to me and said, "Why don't you divorce my son, Emily?" I froze as I reached for my tea. I never expected my mother-in-law to say something like that. My father-in-law quietly ate his breakfast, his face unreadable. I know this might sound harsh, but now that you've heard this, maybe it'll help you see things clearly, my mother-in-law continued with a smile. It seemed like when someone is truly disgusted, they can only laugh. "I feel terrible for you as a mother," she said. "You don't need to be merciful with my son anymore. Let your emotions guide you." It was clear my mother-in-law understood how I felt about my husband. She was on my side, and that was a relief. My father-in-law didn't speak, but he nodded in agreement with my mother-in-law's words. Their support was comforting. Returning home and preparing for a talk, later that evening, I went back home, mentally prepared for what I needed to do. When my husband returned home, he had a tense look on his face, still upset that I hadn't made his lunch. I asked him to sit down because I needed to talk to him. "What do you want to talk about?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. Ignoring his mood, I insisted, "Sit down, I need to speak with you." When my husband sat down, I handed him the divorce papers. "I'm going to divorce you," I said, the words coming out before I could stop them. His grumpy expression quickly turned to one of shock. "Why are you suddenly talking about divorce? Are you kidding? The kids are still so young," he said, panicking. He didn't understand why I wanted a divorce and tried to avoid the conversation by claiming it wasn't valid, but I wasn't going to let him avoid this. I pulled out some photos from an envelope on the table. One photo showed my husband walking hand in hand with a woman. "Didn't you say you go to pachinko on your days off? What is this? You seem to be having a good time," I said, showing him the photo. His face went pale when he saw it. I pressed him to explain. "No, this is, well," he started, trying to come up with an excuse. He claimed she was just an acquaintance, but when I mentioned that she worked at his company, he froze. She was a junior employee, and he'd been having an affair with her. For a while, I had suspected something was wrong, so I'd talked to my mother-in-law about it. She suggested I hire a detective. When I did, the results shocked me. The investigator showed me more photos of my husband entering a pachinko parlor with the woman and then going to her room. "I have more photos," I said. "You two are very close, so the investigator was able to take many pictures. Would you like to see more?" Finally, faced with the undeniable evidence, My husband admitted to everything. Yes, I've been seeing her. I'm sorry, Emily, he said. I was just playing with fire. I'm sorry for the kids. I'll leave her right now, so please don't divorce me. His apology was desperate, but I had made up my mind. I'm dead set on getting a divorce. I'm not joking, I told him firmly. There was no way I could forgive him. Standing up for myself. I've been helping at your parents' house while babysitting, and I've been taking care of things you didn't want me to, I told my husband. I've told your parents everything, and they're on my side, not yours. They've said they'll help me in any way they can. We worked together, so there was plenty of time to talk, and they were both furious at him. I also told them that we were getting a divorce. When I told him, my husband completely lost his cool. He broke down in tears. Please, I would never do something like this, he begged. He was so overwhelmed by my decision that all he could do was mutter that he didn't want a divorce. I can't be with you anymore, I said. I will make sure you pay alimony and child support. He begged for forgiveness, getting on his knees, but I refused to listen. As a result, we divorced. I insisted on alimony payments from both him and the woman he had the affair with. He also had to pay child support for our children. After the divorce, my husband chose to resign from his job, and the woman lost her position too after the company found out about their affair. My in-laws were furious and told my husband he would be cut off from the family and barred from the family home. With no one to rely on, he had to work from morning to night in manual labor just to pay his bills. A new beginning. After the divorce, I continued working at the Wagashia confectionery. My in-laws asked me to stay, and I enjoyed working there. I needed to support my children, and they wanted me to run the store after they retire. Eventually, they planned to give me the store and their home. Naturally, I intended to take over, and in the future, I will be the owner of the confectionery. I will continue working hard at my job while raising my children. Looking ahead to the future,